of stillness that settles over a small college town in the hours before dawn. The bars have closed, the last lights have gone out. The streets are empty, and there is nothing, no sound, no movement to suggest that anything in this world is wrong. On the morning of the 13th of November, 2022, that stillness was a lie. Inside this house, on the morning that would change this community forever, 4 young people were sleeping. They had come home late from a night out. They laughed. They had eaten. They had gone to bed with no reason in the world to believe they were in danger. Somewhere, not far away, a man was already in motion. He had been here before, many times in fact. He had watched this house. He had studied it, its layout, its rhythms, the comings and goings of the people inside it. He had planned, with cold and deliberate precision, exactly what he was going to do. What made this man different from other killers was not his violence. It was his education. Bryan Kohberger was a doctoral student in criminology. He studied murder for a living. And on the night of the 13th of November 2022, he became it.
Thank you, Your Honor. What happened that night changed everything. Because of him, 4 beautiful, genuine, compassionate people were taken from this world for no reason. He didn't just take their lives. He took the light that carried it into every room. He took away how they made everyone feel safe, loved, and full of joy. He took away the ability for me to tell them that I love them and that I'm so proud of them. He took away who they were becoming and the futures they were going to have. He took away birthdays, graduations, celebrations, and all the memories that we were supposed to make. All of it is gone. And all the people who loved them are just left to carry that weight forever. He didn't just take them from the world. He took them from me, my friends, my people who felt like my home, the people I looked up to and adored more than anyone. He took away my ability to trust the world around me. What he did shattered me in places I didn't know could break. I was barely 19 when he did this. We had just celebrated my birthday at the end of September. I should have been figuring out who I was. I should have been having the college experience and starting to establish my future. Instead, I was forced to learn how to survive the unimaginable. I couldn't be alone. I had to sleep in my mom's bed because I was too terrified to close my eyes. Terrified that if I blinked, someone might be there. I made escape plans everywhere I went. If something happens, how do I get out? What can I use to defend myself? Who can help? And then there are the panic attacks. The kind that slam into me like a tsunami out of nowhere. I can't breathe. I can't think. I can't stop shaking. All I can do is scream because the emotional pain and the grief is too much to handle. My chest feels like it's caving in. Sometimes I drop to the floor with my heart racing, convinced something is very wrong. It's far beyond anxiety. It's my body reliving everything over and over again. My nervous system never got the message that it is over, and it won't let me forget what he did to them. People call me strong. They say I'm a survivor, but they don't see what my new reality looks like. They don't see the panic attacks, the hypervigilance, the exhaustion, the way I scan every room I enter, the way I flinch at sudden sounds. They don't know how heavy it is to carry so much pain and still be expected to keep going, and that's because of him. He stole parts of me I may never get back. He took the version of me who didn't constantly ask, what if it happens again? What if next time I don't survive?
Before we go any further, before we talk about the investigation, the evidence, the psychology of what happened, you need to know who these 4 people were. Because it is far too easy, in cases like this, to let the killer become the story, to let his name be the one that stays with you. That is not what this is. Kaylee Gonsalves was 21 years old and from Rathdrum, Idaho. By every account, she was magnetic, the kind of person who walked into a room and made it brighter without trying. She was close with her family, fiercely loyal to her friends, and she was preparing to graduate that spring. Her father, Steve, has described her as the heartbeat of their family. Madison Mogan was also 21, and she and Kaylee were best friends in the deepest sense of the word, the kind of friendship built on years of shared history, private jokes, and the easy comfort of knowing someone completely. They had been best friends since childhood. They were inseparable. On the last night of their lives, they were together, as they almost always were. Xana Kernodle was 20 years old. She was studying marketing. She was kind, driven, and she was in a relationship with Ethan Chapin, a couple that everyone who knew them described as genuinely happy. She had been living in the King Road house for just a few months, building the kind of ordinary, beautiful college life that most people take entirely for granted. Ethan Chapin was also 20, and unlike the 3 housemates, he lived in a different dormitory on campus. He had come to stay that night simply to spend time with Xana. He was, by every account, an easygoing, warm young man. A twin whose brother and parents would later describe the unbearable hole that his absence has left in the center of their family. That photograph was posted on a Saturday evening. By Sunday morning, all 4 of them were gone. The house on King Road had 6 people living in it. 3 of them were not home that night. 2 others were asleep in their rooms on the ground floor, behind locked doors, and would survive. But not without bearing a weight they will carry for the rest of their lives. It was a Saturday night in November, in a college town. The kind of night that was supposed to mean nothing more than it appeared to. On the evening of Friday, November 11th, the 4 of them had gone out separately and then together. Visiting bars in downtown Moscow, catching up with friends, doing all of the things that 20-year-olds do on a Friday night in a college town. In the early hours of November 13th, somewhere between approximately 4 and 4:25 inches the morning, based on what investigators would later piece together, a figure dressed in black entered the house on King Road. He entered through a sliding glass door on an upper floor. He moved through the house with purpose. He knew the layout, or at the very least, he had studied it. Kaylee and Madison were in the same room, together as they almost always were. They never woke up. Xana and Ethan were in the next room. Investigators believe Xana may have been awake when he entered. That there was a struggle. A brief, desperate, impossible struggle against a man who was larger and armed and had already made his decision long before he ever set foot inside this house. He left. He walked out of the house through the same door he had entered. He got into his car and he drove away. 2 of the 6 residents of that house were still alive, sleeping in their ground floor rooms with locked doors, which very possibly saved their lives. They would not discover what had happened until the following afternoon. At approximately noon on November 13th, One of the surviving roommates placed a call to a friend. She thought, she said, that something was not right in her house. Police arrived to find 4 people dead. Moscow, Idaho had not seen a murder in roughly 5 years. What they found inside that house that afternoon would launch one of the most watched, most discussed criminal investigations in modern American history. And in the early hours of that investigation, the police had almost nothing. In the immediate aftermath of the discovery, the Moscow Police Department found itself at the center of something they had, in all likelihood, never prepared for. This was a quiet university town. The department had roughly 40 sworn officers. They were now investigating what appeared to be a targeted, premeditated, quadruple homicide. And they had no witnesses, no weapon, no suspect, and no clear motive. The early investigation generated more confusion than clarity. Police confirmed that the victims had been killed with a fixed-blade knife, a large one, based on the nature of the injuries. The weapon was never found. It has never been recovered. Investigators also confirmed, somewhat controversially, that they did not believe the surviving roommates were involved. They had both been in their locked rooms. Multiple witnesses had confirmed the victims' movements throughout the night. None of the surviving housemates had been the target. But the question that haunted every briefing, every press conference, every agonized parent on national television, who did this, had no answer. Thousands of tips poured in. According to investigators, they received so many calls, so many messages, so many names from concerned members of the public that the sheer volume became its own operational challenge. Every lead had to be logged, assessed, and followed up on. Officers who had never worked a major homicide were now running down dozens of potential suspects simultaneously. False leads consumed time and resources. Names were put forward by the public based on nothing more than rumor, proximity, or social media suspicion. Some of those named publicly had their lives upended by accusations that had no basis in fact. Meanwhile, the killer, still unidentified, was going about his daily life. He was grading papers. He was attending classes. And within weeks of committing 4 murders, he was having conversations with his fellow graduate students. Conversations that, in retrospect, say everything about who this man was. About 3 weeks after the murders, a fellow Ph.D. student in Kohberger's department spoke with him about the case. This was a conversation that, months later, she would relay to investigators. He told her that whoever committed the crimes must have been pretty good. He also offered his assessment that it was likely a one-and-done type thing. Think about that for a moment. A man who had committed 4 murders, speaking to a colleague about those murders, offering his professional criminological opinion on the perpetrator. He was performing analysis on himself. What investigators did not yet know, but were beginning to piece together through cell phone data and tip analysis, was that a white Hyundai Elantra had been seen in the vicinity of the King Road house in the early morning hours of November 13th. Witnesses had described the vehicle. Traffic camera footage had captured fragments of it at key points, but at that stage, they did not have a registration. They did not have a face. They had a make, a model, and an approximate time frame. It was enough to narrow the field considerably. It was not yet enough to make an arrest. And then there was the cell phone data. Records would later show that a phone associated with Kohberger had pinged cell towers near the King Road address on at least 12 separate occasions in the months prior to the murders. 12 times his phone had placed him in the vicinity of that house. 12 times, apparently, he had been there to watch it, to study it, to plan. A criminology doctoral student, studying the scene of a crime he had not yet committed. The evidence was building. The investigators just didn't have a name to attach to it yet. That was about to change. Every major criminal investigation has a single moment, a pivot point, where the trajectory of the case shifts irrevocably. In the Idaho murders, that moment came in the form of one small, tan leather object, a knife sheath.
To this case, and don't forget, it all comes down to DNA, because on the knife sheath that has been described just like this one at the crime scene, beneath the victims, on this little snap, see, I gotta close the snap. This is where DNA was gathered that they have allegedly connected to the suspect. That's what you have to remember.
So they found the DNA of 3 people underneath her fingernails. And again, at that time, it was unclear whose DNA that was. Could it have been Bryan Kohberger? Could it have been Madison Mogen? Obviously, it would have been hers because they were her fingernails, but it could have been Kaylee's. So it seemed as if, to me, the fact that the prosecutors were planning to introduce that, the defense wanted to keep that out, and then here we have these new photos, these new images coming out of the fingernails, that there could have been some sort of expert that testified as to what type of DNA was under those nails and who it belonged to.
Joseph Scott Morgan, what are you taking away from the nail clippings in this case?
Well, here's the thing. Relative to the nail clippings, it's out of context relative to the hands, right? So most of the time, as was reported, traditionally when you think about nail clippings that we take in the morgue, and also nail scrapings, that's another thing we do, is that you think that the victim is fighting back, essentially dragging their hand over the face, the neck. I've seen them up and down arms before, and all the while, the nails are collecting this evidence, if you will, almost like a plow going through dirt. Here's the thing. We don't know, and the reason I said it's out of context, we don't know what the condition of the rest of the hands were. We only see the nails, okay? So if someone is touching their own body, and remember, these injuries are rather significant, if they're in the midst of touching their own body, you can have deposition under the nails and on the top side of the nails as well that might be their own blood. It doesn't necessarily mean it is DNA or biological tissue from the perpetrator. So we're kind of left in the lurch here, I think, as far as information goes, because we don't have a description of the hands necessarily. And that would be important. And also if we had photographs of the hands with the nails intact prior to clipping or scraping.
When forensic technicians processed the crime scene at King Road, they discovered a Ka-Bar knife sheath left on Madison Mogen's bed. The knife itself, believed to be the murder weapon, was never found. Kohberger had taken it with him when he left, but the sheath he had forgotten. And on the button snap of that sheath, a small, easily missed fastener, forensic analysts recovered trace amounts of human DNA. Touch DNA, the microscopic residue of skin cells left behind simply by handling an object. It was a single source, a single male profile, unknown, but it was something. Here is where the investigation took a turn that, even a decade ago, would not have been possible. Investigators turned to a technique called investigative genetic genealogy, IgG. It is a field that combines traditional DNA analysis with genealogical research and large public ancestry databases. You upload an unknown DNA profile to a public database and you search for partial matches, not necessarily the suspect himself, but relatives, cousins, parents, siblings, people who share enough genetic material to suggest a family connection. In this case, the DNA from the knife sheath was a partial match not to Bryan Kohberger directly, but to a male relative within his family, an older male, his father. By the time this genealogical match pointed investigators toward the Kohberger family, they had already identified Bryan Kohberger as a person of interest through other means, the white Hyundai, the cell phone data, and his proximity to the scene. But they needed confirmation. They needed his DNA. What they did next was methodical and legally considered. They located the Kohberger family residence in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, a small community in the Pocono Mountains, where Bryan Kohberger had returned for the winter holidays. And during the night hours, they conducted what law enforcement calls a trash pull. They retrieved garbage that had been placed at the curb for collection. Inside that garbage, they found a used Q-tip. DNA from the Q-tip matched the profile of the unknown older male from the knife sheath. The lab's conclusion was unambiguous. The statistical probability of someone other than Bryan Kohberger's father being the source of that DNA was less than 1 in 5 million. The father's DNA matched the father of the unknown male on the knife sheath. The unknown male on the knife sheath was Bryan Kohberger. On the 30th of December 2022, 47 days after the counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of burglary, and remanded without bail. And then the waiting began. 2.5 years of motions, hearings, delays, and debate during which Bryan Kohberger said almost nothing. Almost. Bryan Kohberger is, depending on who you ask, one of 2 things. He is either a man whose academic immersion in the psychology of violence gradually infected and warped something that was already broken inside him, or he is a man who was drawn to the study of violence precisely because that darkness was already there. And the study simply gave it shape, language, and method. Either way, the result is the same. Before he ever arrived at Washington State University, there were signs, uncomfortable signs, the kind that are always obvious only in retrospect. Former classmates at his previous institution described him as socially awkward, intense, someone who made people feel, without always being able to articulate why, vaguely uneasy, obsessive about crime, cold in a way that reads less as shyness and more as detachment. At Washington State University, those concerns escalated. Multiple fellow graduate students later told investigators that Kohberger enjoyed conflict, was condescending toward women, and had a particular fascination with what is academically termed sexual burglary. A phrase that, in the context of everything that followed, requires no further commentary. One faculty member was so alarmed by his behavior that she told colleagues she believed Kohberger had been involved in a break-in at a female graduate student's apartment. She felt strongly enough to argue that his funding should be cut, that he should be removed from the program entirely. She was not listened to. Years before the murders, a Reddit account later linked to Kohberger posted in a forum asking individuals with criminal histories to describe their thoughts and feelings before, during, and after committing crimes. He framed it as academic research. Perhaps it was, but when you consider what he did on the morning of the 13th of November, 2022, you have to ask, was he researching crime or was he rehearsing it? What investigators later confirmed was this. In the hours after the murders, Kohberger turned his phone back on south of Moscow, creating a digital breadcrumb trail on his route home. Then he returned to his apartment. He attended his classes the following week. He graded his students' papers. He took a shower and ate and slept and lived as though he had done nothing more than take a long drive. But beneath that performance of normalcy, the forensic evidence tells a different story. He began paying exclusively in cash. He started wearing gloves in public. In supermarkets, on campus, he was obsessively cleaning his car, removing carpet fibers, vacuuming, wiping surfaces. He avoided the area of Moscow entirely. This was not the behavior of a man in shock. This was not the behavior of someone who had snapped, had a breakdown, had acted impulsively, and now could not believe what he had done. This was the behavior of a man who was managing, controlling, executing a plan he had clearly thought about in advance. The question of motive has never been fully answered. No personal connection between Kohberger and any of the 4 victims has ever been established. Investigators examined the possibility of a specific obsession with one of the victims. Social media contact, messages, any kind of prior relationship. They found nothing definitive. No evidence of a sexual element. No financial connection. No known grudge. Cell phone records showed he had been near the King Road house at least 12 times in the months before the murders. The working theory, and it remains a theory, is that he chose that house because it was a busy, occupied, high-visibility student property. That the choice was made not from personal hatred of the people inside, but from something colder still: opportunity, selection. He picked a house, he watched it, he planned, and then he went. Forensic psychologists who have studied this case have described various possible frameworks: a personality organized around domination and control, a grandiose internal world in which other people exist primarily as instruments, the chilling possibility that for Bryan Kohberger, the act was not an explosion of emotion, but a proof of concept. Evidence gathered privately that he could do it and that no one would ever know. He was wrong about the last part. On the 2nd of July, 2025, 2.5 years after his arrest, Bryan Kohberger stood before a judge and pleaded guilty. Not no contest, not silent, guilty. The plea came just weeks before jury selection was due to begin for what had been expected to be one of the most watched trials in American criminal history. In exchange for the guilty plea, prosecutors agreed to remove the death penalty from the table. The judge asked him directly, "Are you pleading guilty because you are guilty?" And Bryan Kohberger said, "Yes, nothing more." When the sentencing hearing arrived on July 23rd, family after family walked to the podium and said what could not be adequately said. Madison Mogen's father, Ben, held a Father's Day card. The last thing his daughter ever wrote to him, she had written, "I can't wait till we can hang out again soon." Steve Goncalves, Kaylee's father, looked directly at Kohberger and said, "Today, we're here to finish what you started." Kaylee's sister, Aliva, looked at him without flinching and said, "No one is scared of you today. No one is impressed by you. No one thinks you're important." And then she said something that cut through the entire spectacle of this case and reduced it to its raw, devastating human core. They would have been kind to you. If you had approached them in their everyday lives, they would have given you directions, thanked you for the compliment. In a world that rejected you, they would have shown mercy. When given the opportunity to speak, to offer anything, any word, any explanation to the people whose lives he had permanently and catastrophically altered, Bryan Kohberger declined. "Respectfully," he said. Judge Stephen Hippler sentenced Bryan Kohberger to 4 consecutive life terms in prison without the possibility of parole. 1 for each murder, an additional 10 years for the burglary charge. He will die in prison at Idaho Maximum Security Institution in the confines of a world deliberately designed to be small and controlled and inescapable. The judge, in delivering the sentence, acknowledged something that might be the most quietly devastating truth of this entire case: that Kohberger's motive for the killings would likely never be known, and that, in seeking endlessly to understand it, in giving that question too much space, there was a risk of granting him a power he had not earned. The judge was right, and it is worth holding on to that. What we are left with, ultimately, is not the story of Bryan Kohberger. It is the story of 4 young people who were 20 and 21 years old, who were living the kind of ordinary, irreplaceable lives that most of us live without a second thought, and who were taken with a coldness so complete that even now, even after the guilty plea, the sentencing, the closing of the courtroom doors, their families are still waiting for an explanation that may never come. Madison and Kaylee, Xana and Ethan. Their names are the ones worth remembering. There is something about this case, something that sits at the edge of comprehension, that I keep returning to. Bryan Kohberger spent years studying the psychology of people who commit violent crimes. He read the case files. He researched the patterns. He asked convicted criminals to describe what it felt like. Before, during, and after. And then, one morning, before dawn, in a sleeping college town, he provided his own answer. The question I want to leave you with, and I'd genuinely like to hear your thoughts in the comments below, is this. Does studying the mechanics of evil make someone more likely to commit it? Or does it simply give language to something that was always there, waiting? If this video gave you something to think about, consider subscribing to The Malice Mind. We go deep on the cases that ask the hardest questions. New videos every week. And if you've watched this far, you already know this channel isn't here for spectacle. It's here for understanding. See you in the next one.